And that's going to create a safety. And that's going to end the game. And you know why I'm laughing, don't you?
Yeah.
Of course you do.
In just a few short years, how did we go from broadcasters making subtle references to gamblers?
There are some people happy, some not so happy.
Right, and there are some going, I can't believe what just happened.
To this.
A record Super
Caesar's Super Dozer partner of
biggest parlay I've ever hit. Turned into over $500,000.
the Chiefs.
Anita Maxine.
Well, it's a funny story. To me, this isn't just research or something that's academic. I mean, it's something I grew up around. I've been around it my whole life. I'm from Hot Springs, Arkansas, which once upon a time was America's gambling capital. Long before Vegas was Vegas, Hot Springs was Vegas in the United States. I grew up in a town where there was a bookie on the Chamber of Commerce. I grew up going to the racetrack with my family on the weekends. It wasn't something that I saw as being some sort of behavior that was pathological or taboo. That's just what we did for fun. And it wasn't until I was able to leave that place and travel a bit to realize that not everybody in America thought about it the same way, especially not in the 80s and 90s. I mean, Pete Rose was a big deal.
Mr. Rose has accepted baseball's ultimate sanction, which is lifetime ineligibility.
Did you bet on your own team?
Yes.
There's a name for it, gambling on sporting events. It's called gaming. It's clandestine, immensely profitable, and entirely illegal, except in the state of Nevada.
I bet just about every week, yeah, on the football games.
A couple of dollars makes the game more interesting.
Today, if you want to bet on a game, you can log on to any one of these apps, and there's literally tens of thousands of different bets that you can make on any given game. There's just a fire hose of bets that are sprayed directly into your face. And that's not how it always used to work. If you made a legal, regulated bet in Nevada, you had to walk into a sports book, probably in a casino like Caesar's Palace. There was a small menu of things that you could choose from and bet on. You could bet what's called a side, which is picking which side in a game would win, or you could bet on a total, which is betting that the total number of points scored in a match would be over or under a certain number. You could bet some futures, like what team will win the championship in certain sport this year, but that's pretty much it. The idea that you could bet on literally tens of thousands of things every day would have been outrageous back then. That's because the sports books in places like the Stardust in Las Vegas, they operated as amenities to the customers. Casinos only had sports books in order to bring in customers who wanted to bet on the game and hope that they would stay in the casino and gamble on other things. In that sense, it sort of operated as a loss leader for the casino and was subsidized or bankrolled by the rest of the casino. Today, a lot of the sports books that we bet with in America don't have casinos bankrolling them. That puts a lot of pressure on the sports book to make money through sports bets. This can be confounding and frustrating for the shareholders of these publicly traded companies when the CEO has to come to a earnings meeting and tell them that all the favorites covered this season.
While we experienced the most customer-friendly stretch of NFL sport outcomes we've ever seen early in the fourth quarter, which pressures our revenue and adjusted EBITDA in the short term, the overall trajectory of our business is strong.
Customer-friendly stretch of NFL outcomes is code for the bettors won too much.
Just last night, Bengals make that two-point conversion, and that last touchdown doesn't go in for a fourth parlay, then would have been very different outcomes. So, things can swing either way.
Understood. Looked like pass interference to me. Thank you very much.
Unlike a lot of businesses in America, the interests of the business and the business's customers here are incredibly diametrically opposed. And so that means that in order for a sports book to make more money, they have to win more money, which is to say that you have to lose more money. That, I think, is a far more problematic dynamic that exists with the expansion of sports betting right now, the relationship between the customer and the provider. I think that creates a relationship to this activity that's a lot different than what the relationship between the bettor and the bookie used to be. The earliest sports in America were literally just foot races. Those foot races were put together by gamblers for the purposes of betting on. I mean, up until about 1950, the most popular sports in America are baseball, horse racing, and boxing. And baseball really only started to grow in popularity in America when gambling was outlawed at the horse races. And so the bookmakers would start taking bets on ball games from the stands. So we see this sort of cycle where sports in America have really grown in popularity and become a bigger part of American culture because people could figure out how to gamble on it.
Bet on them now at 9-1.
There's always been this question about the morality of it and how much betting on it has a corrupting influence on the sport. But what we know is that even when gambling is prohibited, people have continued to do it. In some ways, gambling is as American as apple pie. There was this real anti-tax attitude among the original colonists, and the way they got around that was they implemented lotteries as sort of a voluntary tax. What's sometimes called a sin tax was very attractive to government leaders who didn't want to tax people who didn't want to pay taxes, but wanted all these things, like that Simpsons episode about the Bear Patrol, where everybody wants things, but they don't want to necessarily pay for it.
Mr. Mayor, I hate to break it to you, but your city is infested with bears. Bear Patrol tax $5. What? This is an outrage!
Harvard and Yale were paid for by lotteries. Lotteries funded a lot of the American Revolution. So gambling has always been a part of the fabric of America, going right to the very beginning of America's founding. Most of us who are just regular recreational gamblers, we want to put a little bit at risk, but we like the idea or the promise that we could win a lot. And that's why lotteries are tremendously popular.
Record-breaking Powerball jackpot has reached $1.6 billion.
The chances of hitting the top prize are only 1 in 292 million. There's a chance.
If you're not in it, you can't win it.
Government has come to really depend on gambling revenues. I mean, we've got literally tens of billions of dollars in tax revenue from the local and state and federal level are collected from gambling all over the country. Today, there's brick and mortar casino gambling in 40 states, and there's some form of gambling in every state except for 2. Now they're looking at sports betting as being just the latest chapter in a way that they can create brand new tax revenues without having to raise more traditional taxes on people.
This kind of gaming used to be extremely taboo, but when you look at all the tax revenue possible, states legalizing this, there's some incentivizing.
It was a pretty easy pitch. They essentially went in and said, pass this bill, we'll open up in your state, and we'll give you all the money you need to do it.
In Montana, it goes to fund STEM scholarship funds. In Illinois, it's specifically directed to fund improvements to roads and schools. And in Colorado, it goes towards the state's water conservation plan.
For the longest time, the professional sports leagues in America were vehemently opposed to gambling in any way, shape, or form. The NFL wouldn't even let NBC advertise the show Las Vegas during NFL broadcasts on their network. That's how little they wanted to be associated with gambling. They didn't even want the network to advertise a television show that was set in Las Vegas on their football broadcasts. There was this feeling that being associated with gambling would somehow hurt the leagues and their credibility and their integrity.
I think we still strongly oppose in that room and otherwise legalize sports gambling. The integrity of our game is number one. We will not compromise on that.
It so happens that the state of New Jersey challenged the constitutionality of the federal ban.
What I was really fighting for was each state's ability to make their own choice.
The Supreme Court will allow states to legalize sports betting.
But first, legislation must be passed at the state level.
The first thing we saw was a pretty big marketing push.
You make so much noise. Here's a bonus bet for you and the boys. Hard Rock Pensacola in Florida. Hard Rock Pensacola in Florida.
The marketing was mostly geared towards young men.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of those young men were people who already had been playing what's called daily fantasy sports, but hadn't necessarily ever bet on sports before. I mean, the biggest stars that you could think of were being enlisted to be in sports betting commercials, to be spokespeople for sports betting companies, athletes. Even the leagues started to sign deals with sports books. They wanted a piece of the pie from the sports betting boom. And they said, if you're going to use our data to process bets and make odds or whatever you're going to do, you're going to pay us a big fee for it.
We think we should be compensated in certain ways for the additional costs we're going to incur through various integrity measures.
So the sports leagues immediately got involved and got into bed with the sports books right away. There was no hesitation at all once it was all legal.
The Supreme Court ruled we have to adjust.
The Supreme Court made the decision. We've got to adjust to that.
I mean, now you can't go to a professional sporting event in America these days without seeing ads for sports books all over the stadiums and arenas.
People are so upset at sports betting now. They're being forced the uncouth nature of it, and it's this infiltration of sports that is really frustrating people because people love sports and they want to be able to enjoy this innocently with their kids, with their friends, without being, forced to watch Charles Barkley tell them about his parlay of the day.
I ain't never lost gambling.
Your record is 3-25.
3-25. That's my record for real? Yes, thank you, Fanduel. Hey, you think this dude? I'm going on a winning streak, brothers.
You know what? Some would call this wagering, gambling.
I think the way you've sold this, no, I think what it is risk-free investment. That's the way to look at it.
They're not professional bettors, but they're misrepresenting themselves as people who are experts in this industry when they really have no idea what they're talking about. Once again, furthering this idea that if you know about sports, you know about sports betting, which is why so many people lose money. They think they have an edge when they don't. And it's something that gambling companies prey upon. It's something that announcers reinforce, and it's a problem not only for kids, but for everybody betting on sports.
If I had to bet football as much as I know, I tell you what, in a year or so, I'd be living under a freeway overpass.
These new sports bettors today are especially susceptible to one of the worst bets you can make, the same game parlay.
Not only can you bet on the Yankees to win, but you can bet on the Yankees to win and Garrett Cole to have a certain number of strikeouts and Aaron Judge to hit a home run. And the products are a lot of fun, and in particular what they allow people to do is risk a very small amount of money and win a very large amount of money all in one game.
These bets are incredibly lucrative for the sports books. Why? Because they're very hard to hit, but also they're very hard to calculate what the right price should be. When you start to add all these random, weird, correlated or negatively correlated events, the math to figure out what the fair price should be becomes very, very complex. Hardly any of us can do it. So the sportsbook can then bake into those bets a very, very big margin.
When you got overs and unders, you're in it every time they throw the ball, kick the ball, dribble the ball. Now that bet's got you watching every inning, half, round, period, set, hole, a lap.
A typical bet on whether a team will cover the spread, the type of bet that used to be the bread and butter of Las Vegas sportsbook or barroom bookies, would deliver a 5 to 6% return to the sportsbook. A single game parlay, by comparison, will typically return up to 30% to the sportsbook.
All my kids are addicted, and well, I shouldn't say addicted, I don't mean that, but they like the wrong games. You know why? They like the parlays, and they somehow think that a parlay is easy. Could you please tell people how hard it is to win on a parlay?
Well, you don't win as much, but when you win more, and, that's kind of why people like it, because, when they win, they get a big multiple on their money.
This makes these bets sort of the credit default swap of sports betting. It's sort of like that scene in The Big Short with the Jenga pieces. That's what these are. You're putting together a financial product that as you build these things up, it's worse and worse for you, right? The chances of you winning, but also how bad the bet you're making gets worse and worse. And this is a hard thing for people to understand because I think most Americans just assume every bet's a bad bet. The house always wins. Of course, whenever I make a bet, I'm supposed to lose. So what difference does it make? I'd rather get the biggest possible payout for the few times that I do win. And that's the problem with that thinking, which I think is very prevalent among gamblers in America today, is that it's not actually true in sports betting. In sports betting, you actually can win, and you actually can have an advantage and have the best of it when you're making your bets. Fundamentally, people should want sports books and betting on sports to be fair. And I don't know that it is fair right now, and I don't know that there's any real pressure being placed on sports books to be fair to their customers. Their marketing and what they advertise to people is that you can win, and that you can win a lot of money.
All right, boys, who we betting on?
But the fact is that if you show any real ability to effectively handicap a game and beat the sportsbook, they will limit your bets and essentially kick you out of the sportsbook. They will not let you win. Can you talk to me a little bit about how sports books treat you once you start winning?
They don't want to accept your bets. If you're in a VIP program, either a VIP host will be nice and tell you, sorry, you've been limited, you're no longer wanted here. A lot of the time they'll just ghost you, which kind of sucks. But yeah, sportsbooks don't want to accept winning customers.
Can you tell me about what those VIP programs are like? And
yeah, they're great while you're in them. You get all sorts of perks, whether it's deposit bonuses or profit boosts or free sports tickets, all of these things.
A lot of winning bettors do everything they can to hide their identity from the sportsbooks, including bet under other people's accounts, so that the sportsbooks don't know it's them.
Well, I have other friends who have accounts, and I have people who will put on, their action on my behalf, and I'll have a Google sheet that tracks P&L and payments and everything like that, and what's owed where.
Sportsbooks have always profiled their players for people who are sharp or skilled bettors who can win long term. But as sports betting has grown in the United States, they have so many bets to manage, so many players.
You have almost an infinite number of choices that you can bet on.
At this point, bookmakers are computer programs and not people who are experts in their craft. They're operating at such high volume and speed that it's easier just to boot the winners and keep the losers.
I would get these promotions because I was in their Diamond VIP status, and they were talking about, when I make Onyx, I'll be able to get free tickets, etc. So I was excited about that, and I asked for tickets for, a certain US Open event, and he's like, if you make Onyx, I can probably hook that up for you. So I was upping my volume with that goal of hitting Onyx, and eventually found myself not able to bet as much as I'd want to on certain tennis-related events. There would be a message that would come up on the app that says your bet is too large. You're able to bet up to X amount, which pretty much said to me that they wanted me to bet on the site. Then once I was winning on the site, they didn't want me to bet on the site.
I think the issue for me is one of transparency, right? You shouldn't be able to have advertisements that say sign up and win, and then if you actually can win, they'll kick you out. You shouldn't be able to allow people to come in and lose as much money as possible while restricting winners. You can't restrict winners and then expand limits for losers, all while saying that you're a fair place for anybody to play. That's pretty deceptive in my opinion. So it's not just the limiting, but it's the lack of transparency around it.
I just got this great NFL offer, guaranteed, all up front, and this one's gonna be hard to pass up.
DraftKings is not able to succeed because of some random guy on the street who's placing a $10 same-game parlay. They're able to succeed because 1 in 100 customers is losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And to be clear, if you look at the distribution of alcohol sales, the vast majority of it comes from people who drink way too much alcohol, but liquor stores aren't able to prey on those customers in the same way. They can't send them push notifications that, you haven't deposited in a couple days. Why don't you come back and we'll give you one for on us? I mean, there's recently that case in the Wall Street Journal with a woman who had a family and she just mortgaged her house. Not great, but that's the kind of customer that even if DraftKings isn't saying they want, that's the kind of customer who's actually paying their bills.
There were so many times when I wanted to quit and I couldn't because the industry kept luring me back in, essentially.
That thing that we refer to as ban or bankrupt, I believe, is the problem. If you're a very good player, that is that you have an advantage over the house. They are going to limit or ban you. It's oftentimes document, we're not going to take your action, close your account, or we're going to limit you to $1.90, On the bankrupt part, if you're not a very sharp gambler, you have failings and you'll go for every goofy parlay, and that's the bankrupting.
Right, because against players they've flagged as being winners, they'll limit them. Everybody else, it's like, they'll take whatever you want to bet.
What the goal is not to manage risk, it's to eliminate the risk.
Our wager limits allow us to manage our liability exposure and avoid unsustainable losses. They do sometimes limit individual users for a variety of different behaviors. Some users may have more information than we do. Some users may have a better model than we do. We're comfortable taking wagers for them, but we have to do it in a responsible manner that protects our company.
You have a situation where a patron is losing and being encouraged through outreach by an operator's VIP staff and incentives. What's the balance when that same patron begins to win?
We should recognize that we have regulations in place to deal with companies that are, selling products we deem to be problematic for society. We believe that tobacco companies should be allowed to make money, but they shouldn't be allowed to advertise on TV. Their products are going to be taxed very highly. There's going to be, something on the little box that says you're going to get cancer if you do this. We don't have that in sports betting.
Again, I come back to this idea that all the issues that society is dealing with, whether it's the gamblers being limited, whether it's problem gambling, whether it's not being getting as much tax revenue as we thought we were, they all stem back to whatever the sportsbook can do to make more money is creating all these obstacles. We have to ask ourselves, is it possible for a sportsbook to make money without doing all these things? Because if it's not, this is a bigger problem than we thought, but it has to be, because there's actually been sports betting in America for 75 years.
Las Vegas, Nevada is where the modern sports betting industry was birthed, incubated, and perfected over nearly a century. A lot of people thought that what would happen is that the sports betting business that we've known here would be exported to states all across the country. But that's not what happened. The type of sports betting that we're experiencing today is a lot different than the way that they book sports here in Nevada.
Let me get a $100 parlay on the Eagles and the over.
Since sports gambling became legal 5 years ago in the United States, in states more than Nevada, the consumers changed. I mean, I think the one unique thing about Circa is that we have a reputation to take big bets.
Circa Casino Resort home of the biggest sports book in Las Vegas, is decidedly old school, and in many ways the antithesis of the modern online sports book. They have set maximum bets for everyone, winners and losers alike, and they welcome bets from professionals to help them set their prices. DraftKings, they've already proposed so many wild fucking things. Like, they proposed passing on taxes to the winners. Now they're proposing subscription models. They're constantly trying to reinvent this wheel. Meanwhile, we're standing in a city, in a sports book that was built on a very simple idea that you deal 11 to 10. Take a bet, you move a number. You know, this stuff has been done for a century, right? But to me, it just seems like if it wasn't broke, why are we trying to fix it?
So is it a profitable business?
It's not profitable yet, but we think we'll actually be the first operator. We'll be the operator that gets to profitability fastest relative to when we started. The reality is, we're very much in the early innings here.
We should really be looking at this as an antitrust issue, too. The two biggest sports books, DraftKings and Fanduel, hold 67% of the market share. They even tried to merge with each other in 2017 until the FTC, the state of California, and Washington, D.C. sued to block the merger. Despite not being able to join legally through acquisition, lawmakers allege they've been colluding with each other to shut out more competition. Their merger was blocked under the first Trump administration's FTC. And now, lawmakers from both parties are calling on the government to look into their duopoly power. They're really kind of using the same playbook that a lot of tech companies used before them. They're spending tons of money to try to conquer their market, push out all their competition, and then once they conquer that market, eventually turn a profit. And the stock market and Wall Street is rewarding them for this practice.
Well, shares of FanDuel parent Flutter have soared today. Look at that, up 15% in European trading. That showed U.S. gaming revenue growth up 26% year on year.
There's still a big question about who will enforce the rules with the sportsbooks themselves.
This industry has exploded, and when you're appointed as a regulator, when you've got 77 lobbyists telling you something, not knowing they're all on the payroll of the industry, I mean, these companies are buying our politicians, just plain and simple. I mean, those firms spent $200 million on a ballot initiative. Funny things in this industry. I don't know how it got a bad reputation.
We have to trust our legislators and regulators because they have an important responsibility to the public with regard to gambling. Protecting problem gamblers is perhaps the most important one of all, but it's made more difficult by the patchwork state-by-state nature of the current industry.
Every state has their own laws, regulations, and standards. When you hear a sportsbook ad on TV or the radio, you ever notice the long list of phone numbers that they read at the end? That's because every state has their own hotline. Some states require that sportsbooks put money aside for responsible gambling initiatives, but they don't spell out what those initiatives should be. Some states don't require any money be set aside to address gambling-related harm at all. Of the 82 player protection standards suggested by the National Council on Problem Gambling, the average sports betting state has only implemented 32. And no state has implemented more than 49. As states weigh the fairness of limiting winners or the effectiveness of the current responsible gambling measures, the sportsbooks are already working on their next idea to make more money. If you don't have a casino to bankroll your sportsbook, why not just become a casino?
Sports betting started to get legalized during COVID in a lot of states because there was this lack of funding, and states thought this was an easy way to raise funds, and they were right. But then eventually you realize, well, actually sports betting doesn't actually make you that much money from the operator side. They need to get more money, and iGaming is an easy way to do that. And if you look at states that have both of them, far more funding and far more revenue comes from iGaming than sports betting. In places like Michigan and New Jersey, I think it's like 3 or 4 times as much. And then also, women don't really bet on sports, whereas online casino and casino in general is actually pretty split between the genders. And so by legalizing iGaming, you basically expose this entire half of the population that wasn't gambling before, wasn't losing money and providing tax revenue, that now can do that. It's so easy to, for example, double down and chase your losses in a way that obviously you can still do with sports betting, but the rapidness of it is really, really scary, and it just makes it, I think, a fundamentally different product. It feels like you're scrolling through TikTok, but you're just losing money while you're doing it.
Gambling is something that's really all over, everywhere in America today. It's how we invest our retirement into the stock market, and we're gambling there, and we're told, hey, you don't know, there may be less money when you retire than more. This is a risk that you're taking. And we assume those risks and just hope for the best.
There's a story that we're told in America that the most successful people in our country got to where they are because they took some big risk. They were willing to risk losing in order to win, and their success is their just reward. Ironically, these companies that want to get rich off gambling don't want to take any gamble themselves. They and their shareholders are scared to death of risk, and in their effort to avoid it, they're making things worse. For sports, for their customers, for all of us. But if there's one thing a life among gamblers has taught me, it's this. The strong may prey on the weak, but the clever prey on the strong. If there's a way for sports gambling to exist in our society that's safe, fair, and fun for everybody involved, I suspect it's going to require somebody sharp to figure out how. Thanks for watching The Classroom. We made this video because of your comments asking for it. So please let us know what other issues you'd like us to cover. And don't forget to like and subscribe.